Fishing for answers, don't get hooked. Fishing for answers, don't get hooked. Fishing for answers, don't get hooked. Fishing calls, they got us shook. Smishing texts, they got you hooked. Stay away, stay off their books. Emails, they just want your trust. Mouse clicks, turn your data to dust. Pretexting plots, you really.
All right. Hey, welcome to another episode of Fishing for Answers. Today, I am here with Jyotin Gambhir. I said that right, correct?
Yeah, it's Jyotin, so the Y is kind of
Jyotin.
silent. It's just
Okay.
Joe and 10. But that's good.
Jyotin.
That's
I'm,
good.
I'm so sorry that I normally ask that before the show starts. But I am here with Jyotin. He is an entrepreneur. He's a cybersecurity expert. So I'm really excited to learn a thing or two, hopefully from him today. I'd love to start with a story. So, do you have any real phishing stories that you can share with us today?
Sure. So let me think about this. But well, we had one of our clients where the reason that they brought us on from a phishing perspective was the fact that they noticed after they were not sure about the length of time, but they were getting their website was being redirected to a competitor's site and they were losing orders,
Oh, no.
not realizing that that had come through a phishing attack from almost, it seemed like two different computers, but it was the same person. But it had come through a phishing attack. They started losing orders. They were wondering what happened if the volume just went down, etc. And it was just a redirect from their backend server, um, which we discovered after actually doing a scan of their network as well as their email server. So that was pretty interesting as such from a phishing perspective.
Yeah, no, that's a new sort of outcome. I mean, I've heard of a lot of goals with phishing, redirecting traffic from a website. That's a new one, but I mean, it's the same core concepts. They're always out to steal and have some sort of financial gain off of it. So maybe you could just take a moment and introduce yourself here real quickly.
Sure. So I'm Jyotin Gambhir. I run a company, Secure Flow, and have been in business for over 10 years. Prior to that, I've been in the cybersecurity field for over 2 decades now. Have worked for larger companies as well as startups, among them being Deloitte and Touche and IBM, Tivoli, as well as BMC Software. Worked with multiple clients in multiple geographies all over the world, both in specific verticals like financial services, which tends to be the most mature one, but then across the board in healthcare and telco and pharma, etc. It's been an interesting ride just because it's come from all the way from the mainframe Unix days to now open system to browsers to cloud to the overall perspective of AI now taking all that data and actually making decisions. So cybersecurity has changed over this time, but the concepts have been very similar across the board.
So I think that's a great time to talk about AI. It brings a lot of new threats to the picture. Where to me, it's not just about the threat of somebody uploading some data, and that's a huge threat. But there's other things, and even from a personal perspective, I was just thinking the other day about, well, man, if my Chat GPT got breached, thank God I have MFA on it. But if it got breached, man, that person would have a lot of information about me, and that's actually a little bit scary because AIs are just going to continue to learn more and more about us. What are your thoughts on AI and how it's changing the sort of security threat landscape?
Well, AI tends to be doing a lot of things. One thing it seems to be doing is we're, as human beings, as machines get better, we seem to get dumber in the sense that we are changing the ways that we use machines. So we rely on these machines, everything from our GPS in our car to get us places, to now chat GPT to tell us, well, it used to be browsers and apps to tell us what are the good restaurants to go to, et cetera, to now chat GPT to actually help us prepare presentations, to prepare data for clients, to prepare a lot of information, which we used to do our own research and actually go and read articles. And well, now we're relying heavily on ChatGPT or on Copilot or any of the other LLMs. The fact
Oh,
of the matter is that,
yeah,
uh,
no, continue.
yeah, the fact seems to be that there is so much data that we're giving these machines, like a browser, they're going to learn what we want before we want it, because they're also looking at, what are the activities we go through, similar to the Amazon Alexa or the Apple Siri. It kind of knows, okay, you're going to go from this point to this point at 2:30 in the afternoon, or you're going to get coffee at this time of the
Mm.
day. And it kind of gets your schedule. And so it knows a lot about you and actually can do predictive work, right? It can predict what you're going to do next.
And
Which is
we're
scary.
about to be giving the AI all of that same data. So, with these new edge AIs, which are great for privacy, but we're about to be giving them so much more data, and how much stays on the edge and how much actually goes back, and we have to worry about from a data privacy perspective.
Yeah, privacy tends to be an interesting concept in that regards, because in one way we want to keep a certain amount of data private, but then when we look at social media, we share so much about us that we almost, it seems like privacy is not a concern on an individual basis, but it seems to be a concern on a business basis. It's very different in Europe, though. In Europe, people are more concerned about the privacy. So every time you get into your browser, it asks you whether you want this information to be, in their application, in their browser or not. Here, we tend to accept all, or we just go through that and just don't look at it. So, yeah, privacy is a very important concept, both from a healthcare perspective, financial services perspective, all the information that you have about DMV, etc. But it tends to be perspective wise. Individuals, especially the younger generation, doesn't seem to care that much about their privacy of that data, even though that is a very important concept.
Uh, Absolutely. I really think that we've got to start teaching privacy as early as second grade, and we've got to teach about privacy in college. But we've just got a lot of apathy. I mean, to what you said, so many people, they don't know to care about their privacy. And in the U.S., truly, we don't have as much privacy as other countries. I've seen that firsthand. I was brought on by this news show up in Canada to assist in this social engineering demonstration, right? And part of it is that I'm supposed to do some OSINT on these different people. Well, I go to do OSINT on them like I would in the US, and there's just nothing available. And I'm like, man, this isn't fair. I mean, we need to pick some targets in the US here. um, so, another really big threat with AI is deep fakes. I've already personally talked to people that have had deep fake attacks target their organization. We've had customers that have thwarted them off, but have personally seen these. So it's not just the one incident on the other side of the world anymore, it's happening. What are your thoughts around deep fakes, how we protect against them, and just in general, what we should be educating users on or about when it comes to deep fakes?
Yeah, I mean, From a deepfake perspective, I think there's the overall voice related phishing attacks, and then there are these image related attacks around information about you that's kind of a duplicate of you, and it can be taken from a bullying perspective in school to as much as a social engineering attack where somebody takes that data and actually um, causes financial harm or other
Yeah.
reputational harm for you. Um, it's a big concern, and with AI, it's going to increase. I think I have seen companies back there. I mean, looking at signatures of both voice and image to try to figure out what is real versus fake. The other piece of it is, again, going back to our discussion around privacy. It depends on how much data is out there about us. There's just too much data about us. It's easier to create these deep fakes, and you tend to see them for celebrities and others because there's so much data about them that you can actually create it and actually use it aggressively.
It's remarkably easy, actually, to create these deep fakes in today's day and age. Did you know they created a red team toolkit already? Which the hacker in me, the former red teamer in me, loves it. That very cool. But we've just made it that much easier to deploy those deep fakes. That being said, we absolutely should be testing those sorts of things from a red team perspective. Actually, so on the subject of deep fakes, I really do think that it's maybe policy and procedure that helps defend against them almost more than anything, because I worry that no technology is going to be able to defend against these types of things, but simple policy and procedure will. Hey, we never send wires under these circumstances, or you have to do X, Y, and Z to get a wire improved, or, just these different things. And if anything feels off, check out a band, check across at least, two different channels aside from the one so that it's not just that one check. I think we can implement things like that. And I wonder if that's not how we do it. Another CIO said we got to teach everyone baseball signals, and grab of the ear. That means it's real.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you rightly pointed out, it's not only policy procedure, it's also training. So making sure the right people are trained in the company for certain kinds of what to watch out for from a deep fake perspective, from a phishing perspective, from a voice phishing perspective, from an email phishing perspective. Um, Teaching the right people based on their roles, specific training modules, both and also phishing simulations to make them more aware and make them better at finding these, engineering attacks per se. So policy definitely provides that. I've actually seen that, but whether that one is real versus a deep fake, right?
Yep. Yeah. That's real versus deep fake today. Did you watch yesterday's episode?
I did not. I did
Oh.
not. I saw this at another presentation. Uh, but yeah, that one is pretty good though.
Which one are you going with? You're going to go with AI?
I'm going with AI.
Okay. What about this one?
I'm going. That's a good one. I'm going with real.
That is AI.
Oh,
What about this one? No, I'm joking. That's AI. But it's Halloween. I had to throw that in there. But no, more seriously, what about this one?
that's real.
That is actually AI.
Wow.
It's amazing because and I threw that in there. It was sort of the trick one because everyone thinks, well, they can't do hands. They've gotten a lot better. I mean, I can do like the artwork that I use in the podcast is, like this, for example, is created by AI, and there's so much that you can do. I don't know. It's just incredibly useful. So let's talk about entrepreneurship. We both founded companies in the space. What are some of the lessons that you've learned over the years that you would give to any aspiring entrepreneur, or for that matter, somebody who's maybe a little bit earlier on, but has already started a company and maybe looking to grow?
Yeah, I think it's at least of course in from an entrepreneurship perspective, it's all about passion, and it's all about going and doing what you really love and want to do, um, and making others believe that you can not only do it but you can deliver. Um, I think from a perspective, just lessons learned, it's all about knowing your kind of doing your SWOT analysis, knowing your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? So making sure that you realize where are your weaknesses to hire the right people to cover those weaknesses. So if you're a techie guy, you need a sales guy to get your sales out there so that you can get your, people to actually know who you are, or from a marketing perspective, or if you have, you need pen testers, and you might know pen testing, but you might not be an ethical hacker, so you need the right people. So I think it's more important to kind of know who you are, where you sit, what you need as a team, and then go out and do your thing. And from a growth perspective, the same thing, right? To know exactly, have a good pipeline, make sure you understand it's not that you have good business 6 months down the road, but it has to be 6 months plus another 6 months plus another 6 months, and every year it starts again.
Yeah.
So, um,
Or your employees lose their jobs because you made a mistake.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, what I've learned is because in the services business, it tends to be project based. Recurring revenue in cybersecurity or any services is always a good thing to have, to develop something which has some level of recurring revenue, or where the client needs you on an ongoing basis as opposed to just implementing something and then waiting for them to do something internally. So I'll give you a good example. So we do risk assessments, and we tell the client, hey, you have to do XYZ to get your risks in order, to remediate them. And once you've done, let's come back, or we can help you do that, etc. What happens there is we provide those risks, but the client doesn't do anything for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months, and we are just waiting there to kind of trying to implement, capabilities, or actually move to the next step. So packaging your service in a way that allows you to have that capability where you have the touch points on an ongoing basis, from my perspective, has been an area of learning, as I run the business and grow.
Well, I mean, I think that there's two really big points there that you highlighted. One is just you have to have constant communication with your customers. They tell you so much if you'll just listen. And don't be afraid to ask, because customers want you to ask. I think sometimes people are afraid to ask their customers, "Hey, what do you think? Can you give me a testimonial? Can you give me a referral? Do you know of anyone who might need this?" All of which, no one's going to mind if you're, as long as the rest of the formula fits, right? So, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And then you had mentioned, what was the other part? I'm drawing a blank on what the other point I wanted to make was. So we will move on. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that when you're founding a company, from my perspective, that's what the point was. It's so critical that you really, really understand how you're going to take it to market, and how you're going to iterate through that plan to make it evolve very quickly if it doesn't work the way you planned. I think that's a really core part that is more important than even the product is understanding how you're going to sell it. And that often, and particularly with the more technical founders, gets forgotten about. And I know I was one of the more technical founders. I'm speaking from experience, right? But I think it's important because those technical founders are often building some of the best products that we see that are changing the industry. And so, that guidance on how to build a company, I think, is so critical.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there are, tons of great books, obviously, from a perspective of reading and getting information as to what is the right way to run a business, but it's very individual. So nobody can really tell you how you run your business other than yourself. But I think evaluation and just looking in the mirror and saying, hey, I did this wrong and I'm going to change, or I'm going to learn from somebody else, is key in trying to improve. It's part of life, right?
And don't be
Anything
afraid to make mistakes. The most successful people have also failed the most. It's the part of success that people don't see. It's the part of success that people don't think about. But if you never try, you'll never succeed. And so by nature, you're going to fail. But as opposed to getting beat up by that, learn from that and see it as just another lesson, because that's what it was, and that's a stepping stone to get to where you truly want to be.
Exactly. And that's the case whether you run your own company, or you're working for another company as a job, or you're trying to improve yourself and get a better job. It's always the same case. Overall, you're always looking at what you did right versus not, and how you can do better.
All right. So I have a big question for you here. Carrot or stick? Um, yeah, when it comes to the people, what do you think is, and I know it's not so simple as just one or the other, but say it was, and you had to pick one or the other. You got a gun to your head. Do you pick carrot or do you pick stick?
So I would always go for the carrot as opposed to the stick. I think encouraging people, because a lot of training, or even phishing simulation, which is training, is about behavior change. We have a natural instinct to trust, and so most people do trust that that email is coming from the person it says it's coming from, or the information is coming from the bank that it says it's coming from. And so behavior modification requires somebody to kind of say, hey, that's not what you should be looking for. This is what you should be looking for. But you did a great job looking at it and trying, and we all get it wrong. And then, so giving some level of um, encouragement, I think is my perspective on improving capability, because a lot of it is training and it's behavior modification.
So I agree. I think that encouraging them, giving them kudos, providing that safe place to learn, creating a culture where it's okay to admit that you clicked on a fish, even encouraging people to talk about this. Because, I so many times when I hear people talk about these scams, they knew other people that were getting taken by the same scams, but no one's talking. And I think the more we talk about these, the way that they're out to get us, the better that we get. And I think our users, it's not that we want them clicking on fish, obviously, but if we create this culture where they're afraid to do anything wrong, or afraid to make that mistake, and they for fear of punishment, then where is the learning, and how do they use their email productively if they're afraid to click on the wrong thing?
Absolutely. And, you're also looking at multi-generational. So there are generations of people who are not even used to using email, or are not tech savvy, your parents, your grandparents, etc. And then you have the younger generation who are very much used to it. There's the other piece of it, that we are overwhelmed with a lot of data. We're getting a lot of information coming at us from emails, personal emails, uh, social media, other emails coming from work. And sometimes we just don't pay attention. And that's not only the case in phishing attacks, it just tends to be life in general, right? That's why you see people having accidents on the road. just overwhelmed. Their brain is overwhelmed, so they don't see it. So
Uh,
training helps.
so you mentioned accidents, and one of our vice presidents loves to use this analogy about fishing where he relates it to your commute and to and from work every day. Well, most days it goes off without any incident, and maybe one out of every 300 days or so you'll have that incident where you almost get in a wreck. You have that emotional response, you that of fear that happens. You're aware all of a sudden. You've got this heightened sense of awareness, and as a result of that, now for quite a while, you're remembering to look both ways or be more careful while you're driving. And so it's not just that day that you're more aware and you're more careful when driving, it's that next week, that next month. And he equated that phishing simulation that you fall for as exactly that. It's the close call at work that helps us remember, oh, I do have to be careful. I don't want to get in a car wreck. And I mean, there's so many analogies to security awareness training with driving in general. Like, we don't let teenagers get behind the wheel of the car without a license, but we often let our employees get behind the wheel of our company's figurative car, if you will, without necessarily giving them any training. And so yeah. Uh,
Yeah, it tends to be, for another example being social engineering in general, right? So you have a tendency to always let the next person in when you open the door, right? So that's the one thing that people use to get into companies, because generally it's the person who opens the door is going to keep it open, and they'll never ask who that other person is, or hey, I've never seen you, because there are vendors walking in and out, etc., etc. So that's just a tendency we have to be nice.
Yeah, no, and I mean, there were so many times that I used tailgating to get into companies. But that's just one of many, many different cognitive biases. We actually have a cognitive index or cognitive bias index on our website that details like 183 different cognitive biases, how the attackers use them against you, or how they can influence your decision making, which can be used against you. But yeah, it's really fascinating deep dive when you go down it, because there's so many of these little mental shortcuts that we all use on a day-to-day basis to make all of our decisions. And I think most people aren't aware of that aspect.
Absolutely. I mean, a large part of, and as I've done security for over the years and now with AI, a large part of security is human awareness, right? So it is human psychology. We have a tendency sometimes to know it all, do things we do automatically, repetitive, repetition. And it tends to be, it's interesting that I'm in New England, and as it comes to winter time, you see in the fall, most people have broken legs, sprains, etc., just because we have deep freezes after rain and stuff, and people forget that you can slip, and there's some black ice, or there's some thing on your driveway or on your deck, and people have all these falls, and it tends to be, and it comes every year, but our the way we think, we are not paying attention on every time going out doing stuff, and we're not paying attention to the season. Even though we are wearing a sweater, we're not paying attention that it can be slippery outside. So yeah, a large part of cybersecurity is awareness and being aware. And that is not the case only with cybersecurity, with everything, but phishing, especially, is taking advantage of that weakness that human beings have in general, on both being nice, being repetitive, uh, which is what AI helps us such with. So, doing repetitive jobs, right? So, it's taking over those.
Yeah, I think that's really what awareness is all about. And one of the real core goals is that, people are going to forget about that ice being slippery. And literally using that exact thing, we train our workers who are going to be outside in the elements all the time. We send them safety notices about these sorts of things. And so on your computer, it really is no different. And I think that the more that we can, uh, break it down into little bite-sized micro chunks of content, the more effective it can be because we can keep it more front of mind. I think the days of the one and done, once a year, 60-minute training session are over because they don't protect us from the modern threats that we face.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's almost similar to, the managed threat environment, right? So it's not good enough to do a pen test once a year or to do a vulnerability scan every quarter. You, there's got to be continuous monitoring, and there got to be continuous vulnerability remediations taking place, because your network today is not only something coming through your firewall ports, it's coming through your email, it's coming through your front end website, it could be coming through, various other avenues, your mobile devices, your laptops,
Even
desktop.
teams, most people that are companies that I see have a misconfiguration when we first test them or do pen testing. Almost all of them had the misconfiguration where you could phish them through their teams. And that's just one more reason for why you have to do all of these things, because it's that building awareness or that knowing of what your threat is. I mean, we can only manage the risk we're aware of, and I think that's a big part of it, right?
Absolutely. And one of the interesting things that we found was that as people started working from home, most people's routers are exposed because they don't change the password on their routers. Whatever they get from Verizon, Comcast, etc., it has default passwords. It's very
Yeah.
easy to get into your router. Once you get into your router, anybody can get into any device in your
And
home.
what's firmware?
Exactly. So people don't, and it's the same thing with TVs and stuff, right? We don't change the passwords on these hardware devices. And it becomes more and more important as we use more IoT devices in our homes, smart devices, as we call them.
So it's Security Awareness Month. Uh, are you doing anything special to celebrate it? And beyond, are you doing anything special to celebrate it? If you had a top three rules of security awareness, what would they be?
Well, I mean, in terms of celebration, it's from our perspective, it's always about education, training, reminding people what to do, what to be aware of, etc. As far as the three rules, um, we go by assess, respond, and protect. And what that means to us is, hey, know your risk, make sure you're responding to it in the right time within a given time, and continue to protect yourself. And protecting yourself can be ongoing, as I talked about: scanning, pen testing, monitoring. But assessing is about not only meeting regulatory compliance check boxes, but also assessing risk. And assessing risk can be multitude, from a perspective of all the various things you use to get into data, because everything is about data today. That's what companies are trying to protect. That's what you're trying to protect for yourself. And so it's always about knowing your risk, responding to it in time, and then protecting yourself on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I actually think we're a little lucky that we are still measuring these incidents in data, and not lives lost. I know there have actually been some lives lost at this point, but it's still predominantly data. But I do think that that is, it's a very real potential. Everything is connected. Everything is, from the pill dispensers at the hospital that could give you the wrong medication if they were configured wrong, over to, our cities and their infrastructure, and all everything in between. There was a talk that got banned from DEF CON, like, I don't know, it was probably almost a decade ago, but it was on how to hack air traffic control. um, Me and my a buddy of mine, Alex Hyde, did a talk in New York about the fire sale, right? And so he's digging into Shodan to see what he can find, and he finds a dam control board from this dam in Italy, and the security is all client side JavaScript. So it's just amazing what's out there, and I do think that it's going to get worse with AI if we don't embrace AI from a defensive perspective.
Absolutely. I think the AI is really only using our vulnerabilities to expose everything that we can do, but it can also be defensive from a perspective of taking all that data and making right decisions. So instead of just making decisions on your network, now you can make decisions based on your phishing attacks. You can make decisions based on your activity, daily activity, and then so much more, as you use multiple devices. So I think AI can improve cybersecurity in a huge way, um, especially what's available and what continues to be available. And not only LLMs, large language models, but there are small language models that can do much more for specific issues around cybersecurity. So I think it's a I know people say AI is going to take over the world and this, that, the other, take over your job, but I think AI can do a lot good for
Oh, I
us.
I agree, and I think AI is only going to take your job if you don't learn AI.
Exactly.
I do think their AI will cost some jobs, but I don't even know that it'll cost jobs. I just see slow in growth around companies trying to embrace, headcount anyway, just trying to embrace AI more, and realizing that they can do more with less now. Um, I look at where we were a year ago, and most of these tools, they were really cool, but they didn't really help us much. And now, 1 year forward, they're starting to get very helpful, and we're already seeing them, unfortunately, be very helpful for the bad guys. um, I everyone sort of sees different fish that attack them. What have you been seeing? Have you seen anything that you would deem, AI driven, or, the something that seems too sophisticated to have been, just independently done without some sort of AI?
Luckily, I haven't seen anything that crazy around, using AI from a phishing perspective. I have seen some voice phishing attacks, which were basically things that were not real, but well, they were real in the sense that we looked at them in a vacuum, in a lab kind of environment, and what can be done. But I haven't seen them being actually used. But there are some voice phishing ones which are used through SMS that can be very, very hard to detect if it's, your mother calling, your grandmother calling, your boss calling, for you to do a certain action or to, ask for help, etc. They tend to be extremely good, and hard to detect. So I've seen them in a vacuum. I haven't seen them being used, but I can see that coming.
Yeah, if I had planned this out ahead of time, I would have our AI Laura Vish you right now and try and get your password. Um, but no, we recently released conversational AI voice phishing, or vishing. And so it's crazy how far it's come. I mean, it'll really get aggressive, and you tell it, like, okay, so do not give up until you've been told no at least twice. And then at this point, your goal becomes this, and you give these sample responses, right? And then all of a sudden, it's really, really good. Probably better than most of the social engineers I've actually met in my life. And it's just super persistent, super nice, doesn't get irritated, and just keeps going after it. And I was just, I mean, I was impressed. Now you can still tell a little bit that it's a computer, but that's changing actively. I would expect within just another month that won't be a thing anymore, because these audio models, have you heard the ones that sound like the Hollywood voice actors?
Yeah. Yes, I have. And they, like you said, they're just getting better, you
Yeah.
know, again, because the AI trains on these sounds and more Hollywood actor voices and stuff. And there's so much data there for them to use for training purposes that they have become extremely good, very, very good.
Have you actually played with any of those uh, AI music generators?
I have not.
Okay, so to put this into perspective, just to share with you something real quickly, remember the jingle from the beginning? Entirely AI created. So I'll just play a little bit more of it, because it's insane to me that this is, I don't know, it seems studio quality.
Answers don't get hooked. Fishing for answers don't get hooked. Fishing for answers don't get hooked. Fishing calls they got us shook. Swishing texts they got you hooked. Stay aware, stay off their books. Stay aware, stay off their books.
Very good.
But I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's insane to me that that they can do that, um, and it's fun to play with. But like these images, these videos. I was playing with an AI the other day where I upload a few pictures of somebody, and then I just give it a prompt. Hey, this is what I want, and I can say, man sitting at a keyboard typing. And well, I shouldn't do that, because it would get the hands terrible on the text to video right now. But for a lot of them, it was perfect, like these amazing drone shots that you wouldn't imagine, or photorealistic views of people, and it would take their face and put it on it. And you could even upload other videos, and it would just swap out the face. And there's these real time ones that'll do it too, like in a program like this. You have to have a decent computer to run it, but it can make me Brad Pitt in real time.
Well, I mean, there are, one of the concerns a lot of companies have is with these domains that are copying your website as a front end to enter your password, and they tend to be really, really good. I mean, you might not know that you're going to the Bank of America website, or you're going to, Citizens Bank, or any of these banking websites, or your own website. They create an awesome front end. Um,
Yeah.
so it's phenomenal, I would say.
So this is a great time to ask you this question. They do create these great phishing attacks. So if you had to categorize users, greatest defense or greatest weakness, I know there's two camps in the cybersecurity field, sort of like there's pirates and there's ninjas.
um, well, are you asking in terms of whether?
Yeah, do you see them as the greatest potential defense, a greatest point of opportunity, or they're just the biggest weakness? There's nothing we can do about them.
I think they're the greatest point of defense. There's always something you can do about them, and there's always room for improvement. Again, just being aware, learning, podcasts, training. There are so many various things that you can learn from around phishing specifically, and just improving your general awareness on how you use social media, computers, websites, everything that you kind of use, paying your bills online, etc. Just get better at what you're looking at and what you're looking for.
Uh, I like it. So as we wrap up real quickly, before we do, I want to switch over here and ask you about role-based training. What I've realized is that because it's one of those new emerging things that we haven't talked about as much as we should have, because we've all known we should be talking about it for a while. But I say this because I see that different people have very different perspectives on A, what role based training even means, and B, what types of roles we should be training for. And I definitely think the industry plays a big role in that. But I also see that, there's just clearly different perspectives and completely different approaches to it. So I'm always curious, if you're going to implement role based training, how do you approach it and what roles do you focus on?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, and I think it varies from not only industry from a particular business to the other, but any role that has access to intellectual property, information about the company, um, that is admin level privileges, has a certain kind of training. Salespeople have a certain kind of training just because they tend to be on the road, outside, working remote, accessing public networks, public Wi-Fi. So a very specific kind of training goes for them.
And those salespeople are very active on social media.
And they are,
Another key thing that puts them at risk.
yeah. So they tend to be more, type A personality out there, meeting people, shaking hands, but also doing a lot on their computer and using a lot of public
Yeah.
networks and public Wi-Fi. Then there's the overall C-level suite. But I think even more important than the C-level suite is, the administrative function. So if there are administrators, secretaries, others who are handling the CEO's communication, or somebody who's handling communication for the C-suite as well as the C-suite, to train them specifically as to what to watch out for from a phishing perspective. And then there are if again, is the developers. So the DevOps people, because
Mhm.
they need to be very specific around what are you looking out for, what levels of code level reviews you should be doing, scans you should be watching out for, um, how you should be patching, who has admin privileges, who moves data from, or files from, your staging environment to your production environment, from your sandbox environment to this, and who has the rights, making sure everybody's aware of all the rights, as well as then the administrative people who give everybody different roles in the company, on systems, right? So in your Active Directory, who is giving all these rights, so that they know when certain things come in, requests, they're coming from the right people. So those kinds of people need to be trained as well. So there are very specific roles, and I think sales is definitely one of them. Sales and marketing tend to be clubbed into one. Finance could be another, and then C-suite could be another.
No, I agree with every role that you listed there, particularly developers. Um, I think security has been an afterthought for so long that it's not even the developers' thought or faults that they often don't necessarily have the level of understanding around the different vulnerabilities that exist out there that they need to be aware of. So absolutely, I think, OWASP top 10. I might add in your IT team. Well, you already said them. So no, we completely agree. Um, all right. Any pet peeves in cybersecurity? It doesn't matter what it is. Do you have a pet peeve in cybersecurity?
Not really a pet peeve, but one thing that I, from is, I would call it again, from going back to the human aspect, being mindful. And mindful is not only cybersecurity, but mindfulness is in just doing everything around me, right? So being aware on what you're doing and making sure you know that you're switching from one thing to another. So whether I'm going to make my coffee, or whether I'm gonna go and cook, or I'm going back on my computer and buying something on Amazon, or whatever it is, just being mindful and being aware, so that you know what you're looking out for, and when you're making these switches in your mind. Because it's very true, there's just a lot of we do a lot of different things every day. There's a lot of things, decision making happening. Some people are good at it, some people are not. Some people are good at switching, some people are not. So they miss things. And I think that is the most important thing, is to be aware and be mindful.
I agree. And honestly, that you really answered the next question that I was going to ask you was, do you have any tips for the end user? And I think that's a great tip for the end user, the admin, the cybersecurity person, just for everybody in general. So, really, really great advice. I appreciated having you on the show today, and yeah, just thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much for to the audience for joining us for another episode. As always, be